It's just been asked.
Ollie was just
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome and thank you very much for coming. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Charles Crouch, Michael's eldest son. I'm going to make a very few brief housekeeping announcements and then throw to some brief formalities. I guess my first thought is if Dad's watching, he's going to be very, very surprised. But actually that's only because Dad was a fairly convinced atheist with no belief in an afterlife, so the surprise will be that he's actually watching us. What he's not going to be surprised about is actually seeing you all here, and there's a very good reason for that. It's happening exactly as he planned it. There's not much to recommend a long illness, and it certainly wasn't the way that Dad wanted to exit. But one advantage is that you actually get to spend a lot of time planning your wake, and Dad and I got a certain grim humour from working out how the evening should go and who should be here. So the basic operating instructions for this evening are in the Grenfell poem, which you've seen in the invitation and it's on the screen, and Dad was particularly keen on. So you'll note that tears are authorised, but only if you must. And Dad intended this to be a celebration. It's explicitly not a funeral, so do pay attention to the other bits of the poem. There's no flowers, there's no inscribed stones or Sunday voices, but you can sing if the mood takes it. So just a little bit of basic housekeeping first. Obviously everyone's come through the table at the entrance. There's name tags and a pen, so if you haven't got one of those, possibly after the speeches you may want to get one just so everyone knows who you are. And also there is some information about a couple of charities that were quite close to Dad's heart and which he thought worthy of support and wanted attached to his wake in lieu of flowers: the Blind Association and the Special Forces Club. The Blind Association was a regular part of Dad's life, and he was, for many years, he took great pleasure in reading books onto tape. And those who knew Dad won't be surprised that he had a fairly wide-ranging repertoire, going from sort of heavy-duty political works through bodice rippers. But the things he really enjoyed reading were books that allowed him to exercise his talent for accents, and that's something actually that used to humiliate his children whenever we went near an Indian restaurant. The Special Forces Club, which Dad is a member of in London, supports ex-members who've fallen on hard times, and Dad greatly enjoyed visiting there when he was in London. And I think he actually quite enjoyed the company of people who, like him, had fought in unconventional and occasionally dirty wars. And so if you feel inclined, please take one of those with you, but obviously only if you feel inclined, there's no compulsion. And after I've said a few words, I'll throw to my sister Catherine, and then she'll be followed by Eric Fisher, who will deliver the official eulogy. I'm particularly honoured that Eric has agreed to do this, and I'll probably need to do a sort of last-minute change to my speech here. I had originally written that Eric and Dad were members in good standing of what Dad referred to as the Old Farts Club, which was gentlemen who had decided to pursue academic interests later in life. Eric told me it's been renamed
The Old Friends Club because we have ladies.
the old friends club, but either way, as you probably know, Dad completed his PhD just before he died. I think literally a week actually that he signed the last bit of the paperwork, and it was something that meant a lot to him in his last years. It allowed him to combine his interest in imperial history, family, and also a fair bit of travel to actually go out and do on-the-ground research. But I think the thing he valued most of all was the old farts, the old friends club. And so I'm delighted in the sense that with Eric doing his bit, this can be seen in a sense as being a continuation of that. Before I throw to Catherine and to Eric, I'll just say a very few brief words about my father. I suppose the shorter version is that I loved him. I'm going to miss him very much. Pretty much every Sunday for 2 decades, Dad would come around to our house at midday, and those who knew Dad will know that when I say midday, I mean noon. I don't mean 11:59, and I certainly don't mean 12:01. And he'd drink some of my dodgy home brew, and we'd have an even dodgier cigar and just sort of have a general catch-up on the week. And Dad had many virtues, but unfortunately good taste in cigars was not one of them, and we used to smoke some truly dire Indonesian cigars. But for all that, it was part of my weekend that I'm definitely going to miss. But having said that, like most teenagers, when I was growing up, my father, and indeed my parents, caused me profound embarrassment, although as a father of teenagers now, where are my teenagers? The good-looking ones over in the corner. I've realised that in fact it's my existence that embarrasses rather than anything specific. But having said that, I think I had good cause to be embarrassed by Dad, as I'll shortly show you. This was taken in the Pilbara where we lived in the mid-70s, and as a family these were very, very happy times. And one of the things that we did, which I used to remember, and I think we all do, as a great part of our lives, was our monthly camping trips. We'd get up very early, it was summer, sometimes as early as 3 in the morning. We'd drive a couple of 100 kilometres out to one of the great river systems, and we'd camp there for the weekend, and miles from civilisation, also miles from anyone else, which meant that clothing was optional, and the result was if you were inclined to shoot ducks in the nude, you could do so. And the photo resulted from one such shoot. And as I said, this caused me a certain amount of embarrassment growing up, particularly as nude hunting wasn't really a thing people had heard of back then. With the advent of the internet, things have changed. If you Google nude hunting, you can actually come up with all sorts of quite interesting pictures. I would recommend you don't do it at work though. The picture was on prominent display at our house in Kalamunda, and a friend dropped by. He has to have been American, maybe he wasn't, but it works better if he was American. He looked at it for a while and then said, "God damn, Michael, you just shoot a really big duck, didn't you?" So on that somewhat unedifying note, I'll throw over to my sister Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I don't think I can really live up to Charles's lovely speech there, but I wanted to welcome all of you tonight, and thank you so much for coming. I'm pleased that you've all come here and to share a common purpose, that of celebrating my father's life. I know that some of us in the family and amongst our many friends were a bit disquieted to hear that we weren't having a funeral. And I can understand that, because a funeral can be a very wonderful and cathartic way of saying goodbye to somebody. It doesn't really feel like you have closure unless you have something. But I'm hoping that maybe tonight, a concentration on my father, a reminiscing, a reflection, the focus on the most remarkable man might serve that purpose just as well, and perhaps with a little bit more laughter thrown in. My father actually wanted it this way. As Charles said, he planned this evening, and he had a guest list, and just because you're all here, it meant something to him, you meant something to him. He was a man who took control all of his life. I believe that he even chose the time of his dying. It went very fast at the end. He waited until his eldest granddaughter had kissed him goodbye, and then he departed. We, his son, his daughter, and his so beloved wife held him, and he left us between one breath and the next. As far as possible, the people who mattered most to him in the world had already said goodbye or with him. I won't whitewash it. My dad suffered a lot during the 18 months of his illness, and we, his family, found it very hard to bear. But he was the most stoical man I've ever met, and he almost never complained. If other people would commiserate on his behalf, he'd just shrug them off. He literally would. He'd just say that he would have a good life, and that he'd been very grateful for the things that he'd had, that he'd already lived his biblical allocation of 70 years and 10. And he was just remarkable in the way that he accepted the hand that fate dealt him. As a sulky teenager growing up, I used to moan a lot about how life wasn't fair, and an invariable rejoinder from my dad was that life wasn't fair and I'd better get used to it. And basically he practiced what he preached: life isn't fair. I carried those words throughout my life, through the ups and downs, and I try to apply them now, because it really doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair that a man who did all the right things health-wise should have such a nasty cancer end upon him. It doesn't seem fair that a man at his intellectual peak, into his final and most fulfilling career of researcher, historian and author, shouldn't get just a few more years to enjoy it in the company of the friends he made along the way. It doesn't seem fair that the incredibly happy life he shared with his beloved Jenny only had 17 years duration. Doesn't seem fair. But life isn't fair. Everybody here tonight has come because they were linked to my father, be it through work or through study or social or family relationships. He was of value in your life. He meant something to you and you meant something to him. But he meant the world to me. Every little girl's dream is to grow up with an adoring, protecting father, and I lived that reality as the much-loved only daughter of the family. He and I were incredibly close most of my life, and when I had my own daughters, he was a wonderful hands-on grandfather, doting even in their infancy and early years. He fostered a love of words within me that has endured today, and we spent many happy hours discussing books, reading poetry, and even collaborating in a couple of published articles together. When I was overseas or living elsewhere, and even when back in Perth, our preferred medium of communication was actually written, first by snail mail, then by fax, and finally email. In the years that I lived overseas, I wrote a letter back home to my dad every week by typewriter. I took a typewriter with me to write to him, and he wrote back to me. The words went backwards and forwards, and I always knew that when I had some communication awaiting from my dad, that there would be something of value contained within it. It might just have been an in-depth analysis of the current political situation, a link to something he'd written, a vulgar joke, or a few words about some family arrangement. It didn't matter what we were saying to each other, it just mattered that we were saying it and that we continued to say it. In our family of prolific writers, he always said it best and he always said it most, and I shall miss those written words more than I can say. Each one was as tangible a gesture of affection as an all-embracing hug. My father's family crest has a motto, ex vi rerum, which he used to tell me roughly translated into from everything something. Now, I don't know whether that actually does exist. I've tried to look it up myself and I've never been able to find that translation, but Dad was adamant that it did exist. Basically, he said it meant from everything bad, no matter how bad, something good could come of it. And he always tried to find the positive in a bad situation. And with that in mind, I think of his illness in his final months. Yes, it was a bad situation, but there were times of great value in it. We learned how kind people could be. Friends rallied around, and the staff at the hotel above which he lived, already friends, tightened their net and they became pseudo-family with their encouragement, affection and practical help. There were healings of relationship breaches that festered for a while. There was appreciation of fellowship and effort. And above all, there was a consolidation of family and friends, and we all drew in together. We became so much closer, and we took immense pleasure in the time that we spent together, knowing that it was so limited. My father loved and was loved in return. With his death, some of the light has gone out of my world. I won't get it back. I know that you feel the same way too, but tonight, in celebrating the man that he was, and by wholeheartedly enjoying the party he wanted us all to have for him, in his absence, maybe we can restore a little bit of that light. Thank you so much for coming tonight.